So today, Donald is going to talk with Erik, and we're going to jam back and forth. I think we can all kind of chime in here. But Erik and I were what were we doing, Erik? We were drinking coffee together or something over virtual here. But
Yeah.
we in and we've all kind of touched on this. Chris helped us a few weeks back with the personal branding and stuff. But Erik and I, we kind of landed on something. It's the about us part, right? Um, and I think this is maybe where we have a blind spot, or maybe we can tweak it a bit to get better results. Would that be a good segue, Erik?
Yeah, that's an excellent segue. To add some specificity, have any of us here, well, us, I'll include myself, had challenges when it came, for example, to creating copy for our websites or our profiles, particularly the about me bit. And our person that we're working with, maybe we're doing the site ourselves, but has said, okay, it's time for copy. We need copy. And I don't know about you, but I spent
Mm.
months on copy. I was fine with the headline, tagline, all this stuff. The about me piece was horrific. I wrote
And
it. Yeah,
and it's
good.
even I think even after we write it to her, sometimes we put it on the shelf and forget to go back and look at it.
I avoided going back to look at it.
So that was too
Yeah,
painful. It's
let's
like,
be. Yeah, I mean, and it's irrational. It's
mhm,
irrational until I began to unpack it, and then the issue came up with a couple of clients, and I actually had a bunch of aha moments,
mm.
and now it's become the focus of a lot of my work.
In the analogy I think we ran across the other day as Erik and I were talking is like, when we look in a mirror, we might not be seeing what we think we're seeing. In other words, in just physically, when you look in the mirror, you understand what you see is reversed, right? And sometimes all you're seeing the kind of the external stuff, but also too, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you come into that with some baggage, right? That made me cloud what you're seeing, or not bring visible some very important stuff. Okay, and we're talking about making, so full disclosure, we're talking about making money here today. So it's the kind of stuff that can connect you with your market faster and deeper, or in areas where you're struggling to kind of connect. Would you say that's a pretty fair statement, Erik?
Oh, absolutely. And I won't speak for anyone else, although I think people have experienced this. When I look in the mirror, I spend as little time looking in the mirror as possible, because I
Mm.
begin to I see lines, I see discolorations in my skin, I see everything no one else sees probably, but that's what I see. So I just am in that mirror for as short a period of time as possible. And yet when we write one of these things, we actually are in a way looking in the mirror. Well, I've discovered two different ways we can move through that and get to a different perspective. Because really the mirror is one dimensional. It's actually a stagnant. It doesn't change. I could stand there for hours and it's still me. I can change my facial expression, you know. And I realize there can be valuable work done looking in a mirror when we're doing deep work internally and spiritually, and that I understand.
Mhm.
This isn't I'm not debunking any of that. This is getting our stuff out there so we can have people read about us and want to know us better. So would it be helpful if I pointed out the next couple steps that can be useful?
I think massively. And I just, reflecting back on this, I remember years ago when I was selling websites, I was working with Chet Holmes, and we had to point out to so many of these businesses that the most clicked on tab on a website. Now this is going 10 years back. I don't know what it is now, but is the about us. And that was a blind spot for company after company after company that we touched down with. And I can't imagine it has changed.
I, I'll speak. I always go there, especially if I don't know the person.
Mhm.
And even if I do know the person, I'm going to say, "Oh, I wonder what this person wrote about themselves." Right?
Right. or
I,
or had somebody write about them,
yeah, or yeah, exactly.
or
So
AI.
so you may leave the room with the mirror if you like, or in that same room. The next step I'd recommend is look out the window. If there's a window in that room, if you stand in a particular spot, and most times of the day, the window will reflect your face a little bit, maybe not. And now you have a vision outside. You have a vision that's wider. It's not 180 degrees yet, and it's much wider than what you're looking at in the mirror. So at that point, now this is metaphoric. Obviously, that's not going to write your about me page looking out the window. But one way that you can manifest looking out the window, if that's the option you have, is to perhaps record yourself talking about yourself. Maybe write yourself 5 questions or so that you would be interested, that questions that you have noticed on other people's about me pages seem to be being answered, and talk about those questions into a tape recorder or into Zoom or wherever you could capture it.
What could some of those questions be?
Well, generally, they're going to include who you are, maybe who you were and who you are now. They may include what you do, what you did, what you do now. It depends on where you are.
How you got there?
How you got there, exactly.
Why you got there?
Exactly.
And so yeah, and so that, you know, there's you know, I work with a lot of people's LinkedIn profiles, and a lot of them treat their profile as a resume or a curriculum vitae, right? That ain't it, guys. It's like, so like when we're saying like, well, you know, how did you get there? It's not like, oh, I got this certification and right? It's like, what drove you to, what picked you up out of your seat that said, hey, you know, I wanted to jump on the back of that horse and learn how to, you know, jump with it. What got you moving? Because that's going to connect you with people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of the things I say is your CV or your resume is where you were, not where you are or where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And in the academic world where I come from, it's really where you were is what's important to some degree, sadly, very sadly, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
So the key question on the recording, and the one that I found has moved the needle for myself and others, is the final of those questions is, what if? And that's a challenging question to answer, say in the first person on a recording. It gets you to think, however, about what you would like the people who will work with you may experience. What if you could do this? And then as you, as the person writing the about me or recording about me, will weave some of that language in. And the next step then is obviously to transcribe that recording. There's various places and ways to do that. Otter AI is one. We heard one last week or a couple weeks ago from the gentleman, the podcaster, and I don't remember that link, but it's in the recording. And then you go through and using your own words, now you can write the about me page with a lot more alacrity, with a lot more fluency. And it still may feel a little uncomfortable. That's the thing, because you've been talking about yourself. The next best option, there's an optimal option, by the way, which I'll get to in just a moment. The next best is to have a family member or someone who knows you well interview you or talk to you or ask you questions and record that. That's better still. The only issue there is, and it's a small one, is that they know you already. They know what you want to avoid and they know what you're good at. So chances are what's going to come out is going to be things you already know, things you've already said. And as you read it, you may feel comfortable with it. It still may not feel like it's compelling to you. But again, we're way ahead of just the mirror piece. But here's the third one, which is actually pretty cool. And I'm loving doing this. And it's actually stepping outside. We're out of the door now. We're outside. Now our vista is at least 180 degrees if in peripheral vision. And if we walk around or move around, it's 360. And at this point, what was stagnating at the mirror and was better with the recordings and with the interview with the family member, this one is to be interviewed by someone who does not know you, or someone who doesn't know you as a family member or deep close friend does. This is where the magic happens. because they will ask a question or follow up with something that another person may avoid because, oh, Erik doesn't like to talk about that. Well, maybe talking about that is just what the marketer ordered in terms of getting stuff out. And chances are you will hear yourself say, in this context, you'll hear yourself say things that you've never said aloud before, and maybe things that you've never journaled or written down before. And as you say them, you will probably animate. And if the person who's speaking with you is paying attention, they will probably notice and say, gosh, Erik, that seemed like a really interesting. And you can put a pin in that. Obviously, you have tape running. There will be a transcript. And now you've got some nuggets of gold for your About Me, maybe even for other places. You know, it's okay to quote ourselves on our websites or quote ourselves on our things, not only quoting ourselves. If, however, I don't know, when I go someplace and I see some of the things that the person has said, especially if I don't know this person, and they inspire me or they touch me, that makes a big impression. Not the self-serving stuff like, well, I helped 6,000 companies. No, I'm not talking about those kind of quotes. I'm talking about the ones that are insightful. Anyway, I'll pause right there because I think that's maybe useful for follow up.
I was talking with a gal in London earlier today, and I've talked with her before a few times. And she's struggling. I know it's shocking, right? Somebody's struggling in business. And today I asked her, so I says, well, how many clients do you have? Right? Like, where are we at? And she says, I got one. I go, oh, we got a problem, right? And I says, well, what's the most you've ever had? It was the same answer. And I thought to myself, wow, right? Well, what am I missing? Right. And so here's what she was doing, Erik. There's other people doing other people that are doing what she's doing. So she copied what they're doing and put it out there. And she's just not working. And I thought, well, so what's wrong with that? And we've all been guilty of that. I call it copy and paste marketing, but I've done it before. So just like, I see somebody else out there doing that, so I'm going to copy that. And wait a minute, it's not working. What am I missing? Because that's not it, is it? Or, so many times you have to pay attention to some of the most basic things. Peter Drucker's phrase from years ago was culture trumps strategy. I'm not sure if he originated that, but he certainly said it and has been quoted many times on that. And you can unpack that 10 ways to Sunday. How many people on this call are musicians? Either amateur or something, or play something, right? So think about that for a moment. How many of you have connected because of something else? And it's not where you're going, but it is something that you have that allows you to start creating that bridge to the other thing. So Erik, in that About Us section, so many times we're yes, it's where we're going, but also too, the Tony Robbins famous phrase, success leaves clues, right? We've heard that. Okay. So what are the clues, right, in what you've done that give indication that somebody would want to talk with you, right? What is your story that would align with where they are, who they are, right? Janelle and I had coffee the other day, and she works with divorced women, but I mean, what's her background? Well, how did she get there? Well, her husband was in the military, right? So, it's all of those kinds of side things that have nothing to do with this, but they have everything to do with it, right? It's that kind of stuff, right? I finally found out Richard could play the trumpet a while back, and it's like we've been talking, and finally he says, I play the trumpet. And I go, no, I didn't know you play the trumpet, right? And we start creating the bond around that. And it's take it out of the closet. It's something else, isn't it? That in other words, we're so close to it, we're not seeing it.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. One of my teachers, and this is going back nearly 50 years, said to his students, if and this is in music school, if you're sounding good in the practice room, you're practicing the wrong thing.
Ooh.
Yeah, that sounds harsh and it's tough.
Ooh.
And for me at the time, at 18 years old, that was some of the best advice I ever received, because I carried that through my entire career. Now, there are times when that advice is not necessarily serving me anymore. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, it's time to get out there and put some stuff out that maybe, you know, doesn't sound as good in the practice room,
Mm-hmm.
yet people are ready for it. However, the discipline of that, I think many of us experienced that discipline as we were coming up, in different words maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
we put our careers or our practices or our work in that kind of a mode. Well, so I'm going to switch metaphors completely here. So I'm guessing some people here, you can show hands if you like, have listened to meditation music or sounds to sleep or whatever that include running water, like a babbling brook or things like that, right? It's very soothing and it's wonderful. Well, do you know what makes a brook babble? The obstacles that are in the riverway, the rocks, the pieces of trees. Otherwise, if there were no obstacles in that riverbed or stream bed, there would be almost no sound. There'd be a whoosh of the water, but none of that rhythmic stuff that is created by the obstacles. So I hope that metaphor isn't too far afield. What really comes up when we make connections with people from different places is we find maybe immediately where some of those quote unquote obstacles are, and those become the connecting points. Those obstacles in a river, for example, create waterfalls, little ones, but they're beautiful. I don't know. I'll speak for myself. I love to sit by a small waterfall in a small river. I can sit there for hours. Of course, I'm trying to figure out the rhythm and I'm trying to tap it out. That's another that's another obsession. Is that making some sense?
In too many times people are going, well, I haven't succeeded at anything, right? Or gosh, I haven't done that.
Mm.
Well, where have you failed? Let's talk about that, because that's a connecting point too. That you're talking about those imperfections. Those imperfections create the rhythmic flow. People are going to connect with you just as much where you've fallen down, where you've been fired, where you made a mistake, right? And still got up, right? And still got up and still kept moving. Hmm.
And that's one of the issues. I mean, think about when we step out that door, that metaphorical door to leave the mirrors and the windows, who knows what can happen? Stuff can happen, and it's not always what we want. And looking back, I'm approaching a significant birthday next year. Looking back, there's a lot of those moments. I wouldn't give up any of them now. There were times when I wish they hadn't happened. Look back now, every one of them created not maybe an obstacle in the riverbed, but maybe a dam, right?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that we don't tend to put to paper or put to recording with the stimulus. Like right now, I'm saying things differently in this environment right now. I'm looking at pictures. I'm looking at the Hollywood squares here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying things in a ways that I've not said before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing myself do that. And I think most of us do that and don't pay attention. I would recommend at the very minimum, when you're talking to anybody else, even a family member, especially a family member, and maybe other people, listen to what you are saying. You may say something that will blow your mind.
Janelle, I could tap you, because like your experience of, kind of being interviewed by me on the call. In other words, you've done really good videos and things like that. But like being in front of a different group, or the group that you're kind of comfortable with, but there's live people there, that it changed things for you, right? There was like an aha moment, right?
It did. And I used to have coaches supporting coaches group
Mhm.
after virtual coach, and we would meet. I was comfortable with that, but I don't know everybody here.
Mm,
It really kind of changed that perspective. And then knowing it was going to be recorded and I could put that information out and
right.
people could see it. And even for me, when I started getting in front of that camera, I just thought about this a while ago. I started like 3 years ago before I even went into virtual coach. I had this little idea, this thought process of, there's the glass is half full, glass is half empty. What if we are the glass and what we pour in it affects us? And so I did
Mm,
this video and I kept trying to record it. And finally I just stopped and I just had the camera on and I just practiced without recording it, just practice and practice and practice till I could get it. And now I feel very comfortable talking. Like right
mhm.
now, you called me out. I feel more comfortable now than I did last week. So
Yeah, and
uh,
something.
it is. It
Yeah,
is.
and that partly you challenge yourself to, like as Eric said, to walk out the door, and engage in the world. And so many times I talk to people in business that they're hiding behind their desk or they're hiding behind the Zoom screen or something like that. If you get out there and touch the marketplace a little bit and be vulnerable, you're going to discover stuff massively, right? Eric, is that kind of what you're?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say one of the words I use now in this type of conversation I have is I call them genius conversations.
Mm,
And two words have really found their way into my work: the word wisdom and the word genius, both of which are words that I have avoided. And and then I looked up the word genius, and some of you know I'm really into etymologies of words, so forgive me for a moment here, except this is going to, I think, blow most of your minds. The genius comes from the root to beget, to be born, and it comes from a meaning of attendant spirit present from one's birth, innate ability or inclination. Geniuses didn't just kind of sprout up at some point, and we
mhm.
know there's many geniuses around us. We are all geniuses, come on. And I don't mean I don't believe that's a new age thing. I think we really are. We've just been, like me, practicing if I wasn't sounding bad in the practice room, I needed to do better. Okay, great. That wasn't unlocking my genius, that was unlocking my discipline and my drive to become a musician. And
Mhm.
now looking back, and I hope for some of you who aren't as far along as I am, look at your genius right now. What's there right now? You all know what it is. Maybe you avoid it. And it's not just one thing. There are multiple things, multiple possibilities. In other words, those rocks in the river make that beautiful sound that we buy recordings of. Where is your genius been awakened by maybe bad stuff happening?
Mm,
For me, that's what triggered it.
mhm. Richard, have you ever had a building that you designed fall down in a wind or something? Richard was helping me with some architectural stuff
Yeah.
last week, and he's kind of like, "Oh no!" It's like, So I mean, it's like, where does that play
No, but
in?
I've had contractors really give it to me a few times. Yeah, you forget something or it's not aligned the way it should be. I draw everything on paper. The contractor gets the paper. I can't hide a thing. The contractor can bury stuff and no one ever sees it.
Ah,
I can't hide a damn thing. It's on paper. But it's no, doing coaching is fun because it's a world of not perfection.
mhm.
Being an architect is, unfortunately, you can't do this thing about we'll just throw it out there. Minimum viable product doesn't work.
Not in the symphony orchestra either, Richard.
Yeah.
If you want a
But what did
career
you
in
ask
that, at
me in all
least.
that diatribe I gave you? Have I had a building fall down? No.
Some on the edge or something, it's like, and your zone has been fairly earthquake proof or something, or
No, we're the middle zone. We get them, but it's
yeah.
nothing's scary has happened. We've had a shaker. We've had a couple shakers.
Yeah.
The ones have been focusing down in southern Idaho and will kind of shake their way all the way up here, but
Yeah.
we're on a fault.
You know, and I think sometimes for all of us, whatever you're doing, challenge yourself to do something different that you haven't done, or from a different perspective. And you know, like Erik, I've played in the symphony. And you know what I'm doing this weekend? I'm gonna usher for a symphony concert. I volunteer. My son is in the Tacoma Youth Symphony, and as a parent, you have to volunteer for something. So I'm volunteering. I have never actually, as silly as that sounds, I've never ushered for a symphony concert. You know what I mean? Like I have to go to an orientation meeting on how to usher. Think about that for a moment, right? All of my years, you see this gray hair? How many times I've been on the stage? I'm going to go, you know, you're laughing, Chris, but I'm going to go to an orientation on how to usher. And I've got they told me how to dress and all this kind of stuff. And I've got to learn the evacuation routes and how to, you know, all of this. It's like, it's going to put me a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it's going to cause me to look at that whole room from a perspective that after decades, I've never really paid attention to. It's just always happened. It's as silly as that sounds. So many times we're saying, "Oh, I've always done this," or "I've got this done." Challenge yourself to walk out the door and see it from an angle you haven't looked at it before, and then revisit your About Me page on your website or on your LinkedIn profile, whatever you're putting out there. Is that really speaking? Is there something I'm missing? If you're struggling attracting clients, getting clients, converting clients, and even if you're doing well with all those things, don't make any assumptions here. That makes sense? So many times I've talked with businesses and says, well, everything's going good. I'm getting clients just fine. I'm going, but what if you could get them better? What if you could get, I just touched down with a company recently, about a $30 million company. And they're doing really well, right? They got a full professional sales team. They're crushing it. And I says, what if you could do better? What if we could come in there and find a way to, and I know we can, so I've already looked at it, right? So FYI, you know, it will probably help them increase by at least 50%. I mean, I looked at so think about that. What they're doing is really, really good. They've got some of the best helping them. Okay. And if I told you the name, you're going to know the name. And they're missing it because they've been looking at it so long from the inside out. I'm going to come from the outside. And do you think I'm going to find it?
Yeah.
Are they going to pay me for finding it? Yes. All right. It's like, you see the difference? And so challenge yourself to go outside, challenge yourself to ask somebody different to look at it, even though you think you've got it dialed in. Makes sense?
Oh, you want a scarier one, Erik?
Sure.
Instead of having someone interview you, Tasha Eurich wrote a book called Insights. The whole book is about getting an outside perspective of yourself and not believe in your own internal fantasies. She says, find someone who is not your close friend, but knows you. Have them sit down with you over coffee or dinner and have them promise to tell you exactly how you come off in the world, exactly how you look. I've not been able to do it because I found that person and he wouldn't do it. It's a scary thing to do.
Yeah.
To sit in front of someone and say,
That's the ninja. That's the ninja level.
That's the ninja
Black
person.
belt, third level, whatever.
Yeah. That'll get you some insight.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
When I would work one-on-one with clients, I'd often, my challenge was always a dozen people. And I would always say, I would say, have a couple of them be relatives, a couple of them long-time friends, a couple of them new friends, a couple of them strangers, a couple of them people on your staff, right? And the ones that would actually do that would come back with the most crazy breakthroughs that you'd ever seen, right? But I would say, when I would give that assignment, I would say less than 20% would actually do it. Well, would do it fully. What I'm saying fully. Does that make sense? All of them did it to some level, right? But so many of them stop from getting all of those different perspectives. And so the more perspectives that you can get, and the more you put your ego on the shelf, the faster you're going to get there. It's hard. It's very hard. Anybody married? It's hard, right? It's like, oh God. It's like, oh, right. You know, if you've been married more than 7, 8, 9, 10 years, oh my gosh, right? It's hard.
Hey, Donald, I've got a quick anecdote I just thought of I just thought of it in relevance to this conversation. Back in the 70s, late 70s, one of my favorite drummers was a drummer named Steve Gadd.
Were we even born
Tony,
then? Are we
he's
old
a
enough
Rochester
to
boy.
remember the 70s? Wait a minute. You said you were getting older.
I played with him.
No. Okay. All right. We got it. Okay. So anyway, this, I forget the exact year, but it was 75, 76, thereabouts. And he's playing in the studios in New York, and he's recording with Paul Simon, and they're recording an album, and the album is finished essentially. And Paul has one more song that he wants to do. They try the song, and it's just it doesn't work at all. And they take a break. Paul goes into the studio, into the booth to talk to the engineer. And Steve, in his words, Steve told me this story directly. In his words, he goes, and I'll leave out the profanities. He just said, I'm just sitting there dinking around on my drums, playing something. And all of a sudden, Paul comes running out of the booth. Steve, that's it. And Steve looks up like, what? And Steve was playing his high school drum cadence from what, Arundecoit High School, or you would know the high school, Tony. And just kind of messing around with it. And Steve goes, that's perfect. And the next thing we know is everybody's back in. And the song is, for some of you will know this, hopefully all of you do, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. One of Paul Simon's biggest hits. And Steve Gadd already had a career at that point. That playing on that, and then playing on Saturday Night Live catapulted Steve Gadd's career. Not to say it didn't do badly for Paul Simon, but he was already a known quantity. But there's one of those things. Steve just said, I was just dinking around. I wasn't thinking about it. In fact, when Steve said, what did you do? When Paul said to Steve, what did you do? Steve goes, I don't know. But luckily tape was running. So anyway, you can see where that's an extreme example. Yet that's something that became an iconic song, at least for me. Maybe not for anyone else, but
Yeah.
Anyway.
This help you guys out too?
We just don't know. You just don't know when that's going to come out.
No. This help you guys out today? I mean, Eric and I, just two old guys getting not too old guys, guys
I'm older than you, Donald.
Just a little bit. We just start thinking, like, what are we missing here? Where is that at? So, just taking another look at that. If you're struggling with that, reach out. Eric is a great resource for stuff. If you've not had a conversation, connect over with him. And just let that rock and roll. Any other questions?
Well, part of that all has to do with being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And Eric,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
how I'll tell that's the Steve Gadd story. Is I was playing bass in just a boring old wedding band, and someone came up, one of the family members, and said, hey, my cousin Stevie wants to jam with you guys. And we're like, oh, come on, because you get that all the time in the music business. But for some reason, I just, what the heck? He can't do it. It's Steve Gadd gets up. And I forget even the song that we played. It was something real popular at the time. And then
tie a yellow ribbon.
Yeah, right. It was a wedding song. But being open to the suggestibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was another thing that you guys were saying earlier that I wanted to bring up, because it was a big aha moment that I recently had, and that is we're always our ego gets in the way a lot. We're always talking about how our expertise can solve someone's problem, but we have to turn it around. We won't sell them if we're selling the solution. We have to focus on the problem, because that's what our clients are focused on. We have to dig deep and speak from their problem. So maybe if we could have someone to look at our about me and
Mhm.
say, does this speak to your problem?
Yeah. And also too, Tony, along that lines, even another level, it's helping uncover a problem that they didn't realize they had. And so if you are vulnerable enough to delve into your own story, maybe corners that you're not aware of, you can build a bridge that will uncover a problem that they didn't know they had. And because your story, your about me, did that for them, they're going to come toward you.
Why do we take a medicine when we go to the doctor? Because the doctor is not there to solve the problem. He diagnosed the problem. So we trust him to solve it because he diagnosed it. Is that in that line, Donald?
It's right in there, and that's why I don't trust doctors.
Bingo.
Yeah, except when they show me the x-ray, it's like, look at that. I go, really? Are you sure? Well, let's x-ray it again. No, that's okay. Another $400. Here we go. Yeah, it's like, hit me in the head with a hammer. Yep, that hurts.
Well, Erik, what in your prognostications there, your recommendations, what purpose are you trying to achieve in the marketplace by expressing who you are or telling your story? What is the social connection you're trying to make? I mean, I know what's to get empathy, it's to find just gee, I play the trumpet too. I mean, there's only so many people who do that. What do you talked about storytelling. That's a big discussion subject now. But what do you think your objective is?
Well, that's a really good question, Richard. And first of all, I neglected to point out that when you've had the interview or had the conversation with the other person, you'll get a recording and a transcript, and then you can put your own words into your about me, and they won't feel uncomfortable to you, or they'll feel less uncomfortable because you said them, right? But going to Richard's thing, I think for me at least, Richard, the biggest thing is it puts out connectable points with other people. Now, someone might read my about me and go, well, I have no interest in that guy at all. How am I going to coach that person? That isn't probably going to yield a very successful coaching relationship. Now, do I want our people that are just like me? No, that might be also kind of like, not an attraction. But the point is not that they need to know everything. If they know some of the pieces, some of the challenges I've faced, for example, and some of the things I've accomplished, if we just have our accomplishments, I don't think any of us believe that when we just read accomplishments. And I don't think any of us believe it when someone just says all the terrible things that happened, right? It depends, but I think it's a combination. And it's really we're putting out a vulnerability in a way. Some of us will get more vulnerable if we're working in spaces that are really tender. That may make sense. If we're working in places like I do, which are more strategically oriented, I'm working with people whose careers have ended or are ending. So I want to know about their backgrounds because their geniuses that they've been hiding for most of their life are what I want to bring out. Does that help? Does that answer?
You're on mute, Richard.
It wouldn't unmute. I kept hitting the button. Well, what you said something that I liked, connectability points. I strategically, or mechanically, I guess that's what I hear you saying, is creating connectability points where people, and I think those are probably emotional more than rational, probably more than rational or technical. You've all seen the resumes. I've done this, 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 I've done this. It's like, okay, what's your story? You know, who are you? I think everything I read keeps pointing back to emotion and story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, when I read an About Me page, not that's 6 or 10 pages long, it could be done in several paragraphs that I feel there's a through line. Maybe a good word is through line, coming from the dramatic, there's a through line I didn't think of it this way. There's a through line in my life.
Oh,
and I just discovered it a few years ago.
I know what you mean.
And it's not you, it's not me being the musician. That's a line, but it's not the.
And for you, what is that? You have 2 seconds to share. You want to? What is your through line?
What I love doing, what brings me joy is helping another person see other possibilities, whether it's playing percussion or the drums, and to learn a new technique, or to find out how all they have to do that is to make a couple changes. That back in the day, and now through these conversations have people realize, oh my gosh, I actually know some stuff.
Yeah.
Or
That's
I
cool.
can do something I didn't realize I can do. You'd be surprised, maybe not this group, but many people would be surprised how much we have to offer that we don't know. We don't know what we don't know.
Oh gosh.
No.
I think you're right.
I've just opened Pandora's second box, third box, and fourth box.
And along those lines, and Richard, I've told you so many times, and remember, Coca-Cola does not sell based on telling you what's in that Coke bottle. They don't detail out the ingredients or even the scientific processes that happen to your body once you drink Coca-Cola. Correct? It's everything but that. And they're one of the most successful brands ever.
Well, that's really that. I know you've said that several times. It's interesting because I know technically what I can do, and I'm trying to convert that from architecture to business. But what I haven't taken advantage of is, in several occasions, people have said some really interesting things about me in my process, and I never bring that forward or talk about it.
Yeah.
I never.
I think Morris, I saw it pop in. I don't look at the chat too much, but Morris, what was your comment to Richard?
I love it when Richard unmutes and asks a question, because I always know it gets spicy.
Oh, gee.
I was feeling some trepidation there, Morris.
Well, it's like we should have the Richard Kilbun show. I mean, it's like, forget this. Donald Stojack talks to interesting people. I mean, it's like you ask the questions, and you've got the knowledge and the books behind it. You don't just have books on your shelf. You've read the doggone things, right? And you know those things. But that allows you to ask very hard-hitting questions, and that is crazy valuable. Crazy valuable.
Wow, that's something to think about in my profile too.
Yeah, you ask the hard questions. There again, as we've talked before, you're the quintessential skeptic, right? and that is a skill.
But I gotta add something to that. Like, you can't say I ask the uncomfortable questions, because nobody wants to be the target of your uncomfortable questions. But what everyone likes is kind of like a reality show. We want to see you ask somebody else, and we can just.
I'd like to, yeah.
On the hot seat with Richard.
Have you guys ever seen Doc Martin, that show? My girlfriend thinks I'm Doc Martin.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. Erik, thank you for generating the impetus for this today. I think this was very helpful. It's like the 800-pound gorilla that we're kind of there. And I'm going to hit the stop record button. That was really good.